Hi, my name is Dawn. I'm a psychiatric mental health nurse practitioner. I wanted to talk today about suicide. One of the reasons I wanted to kind of bring this up is we just went through the holidays, and usually after the holidays we get pretty busy here at the inpatient units leading up to the holidays and then right after the holidays. And it's such a complicated topic. So I sort of wanted to discuss what leads us to that place, or what leads patients to that place. So there can be life events that take place that someone who never thinks about harming themselves, never thinks about suicide, all of a sudden a horrible life event can take place, and they just feel so hopeless, and they start to have these thoughts and they don't know where to turn. There are also people who suicide has been their companion most of their lives, and this may be a situation where they were around someone who talked about suicide a lot, maybe a parent with mental illness, and suicide was sort of a plan C or something that parent talked about or struggled with. So as that child then was being raised in that environment where suicide was sort of an option, they were sort of raised with that concept of, you know, if dad can't handle something, or if mom can't handle something, then she sort of turns to suicide. So if you have a child who's exposed to that, then as an adult, they might see suicide as an option or might threaten suicide because that's something that they were accustomed to growing up. We also have children who just suffer from depression at a young age, and they sort of have that sort of melancholy or that sort of sense of just feeling disconnected or feeling sad all the time. Certainly that's something that we see in kids at, starting at a very young age. We just went through COVID, and during that time frame people were very confused, people were very sad, people were disconnected. I always find it interesting that when we start to struggle with mental illness and addiction, many times the first thing we do is we isolate. And if you look at the studies of mammals and what mammals do and how they thrive and survive, they do it in community. But what's the first thing we do when we start to feel different, or we start to feel a sense of something's not right, something's off? Typically what we do is we start to isolate. If you walk through a pet store, you'll notice the reptiles, the reptilian brain, that primal brain, the reptiles are off to themselves. They're alone. They're not in community. But if you look at the mammals, they're huddled together. And this is not just a matter of needing community for the sake of survival for resources. It's a matter of needing community for the sake of our wiring in our brain and the way that we care for ourselves and the way that our body needs touch and needs that community to feel a sense of wellness. Community is very important. That's one of the reasons why the 12 steps is so successful, is because it creates a sense of community and being able to normalize the human experience, to normalize addiction, to normalize some mental illness that goes along with addiction, and having people to kind of bounce things off of or reach out to when there's an issue. Now, it's interesting to me that patients will come in and they will say they're having depression or suicidal ideations, and they reach out to maybe a family member, and the family member will say, "Oh, you're fine. You're fine. Just suck it up. You're going to be okay." If you're in a family that does that, typically that's sort of part of the problem, right? Because they probably don't know how to seek help either. So of course they're not going to know how to give you help. And it's not their fault. They don't know what to do. When they've had feelings like that, they probably have just moved forward. If you're in a family that talks about mental illness and deals with mental illness, then you probably are preempting these things anyway, and you're not to the point where you're going down that far as it is, and you're feeling that sense of needing to isolate. The reality is these feelings and emotions are normal. People go through these things, they go in cycles, and they go through these cycles of depression, seasonal affective disorder in the wintertime, cycling through during the holidays. It's very normal to feel a sense of letdown, a sense of depression. After we went through COVID and during COVID, it was a very scary time. People crashed out emotionally. So when we lead up to these feelings of depression, and the depression starts to get worse, and we start to lose the important neurotransmitters that we need because we're just constantly using them up, we start to just go down further and further and further. We start to isolate, and it becomes this vicious cycle. And a lot of times people will then self-medicate. The reason I wanted to talk about this, and the reason why it is so important, is we have to lift the stigma. We have to lift the stigma. This is not a matter of you're not strong enough, you are not tough enough, you are not smart enough. This is a matter of the chemistry is off in your brain. This is no different than hypertension, than thyroid disorders. I mean, you wouldn't tell somebody who has a thyroid disorder and their TSH is 50 that they just need to toughen up and pray more, right? You wouldn't tell somebody that. You wouldn't tell somebody who's having a heart attack that they just need to pull it together and pray more. I don't know why I keep going back to praying more, but it's not a lack of faith. It's not a lack of strength. It's not a lack of character. It's a chronic disease. It's a disease process. And it could be situational. It could be something that you deal with once in your life and then it's done. It could be something that's a recurrent issue. The point is, it's not a failing. It's not a failing in any way. It's a process. It's a physiological process. And it's so important that we realize that we start having the conversation, that we lift the stigma of mental illness, and that we start actually dealing with this, and that we start making resources more available, and lifting this notion that somehow if you ask for help, it's a weakness. It is braver to ask for help and to break the cycle and to step up and to build that strength and resilience to get the help that you need to live a better life than to sink down into the depths of the depression and the grief and to just disappear or want to disappear. And I have been there, trust me. I've been there so many times, really throughout my whole life. Suicide has been my companion since I was probably 6 years old, because I grew up with a father who was suicidal, and because I had an inherited depression. And it was a struggle for me for years until I got the right help. But the right help is out there. The last couple of years, it's the first time in my life suicide's not been my companion. It's not been a plan C. And it's because I got the help I needed. I got on the right medications. I got a ketamine therapy. I got TMS therapy. I got the right therapy, EMDR. I received what I needed for my brain to heal itself. And I had continued therapy and continued support. It can be done. You can heal. You can get to the place where you're planning to live, where you're actually planning a 401k and what retirement's going to look like for the first time in your life, like I am. So you can get to that place where there was a time when someone would ask me if I am hopeless. I remember there being a time where I couldn't even conceptualize that question because I couldn't understand what the word hope meant. And I know there are some people out there who have been in that place where the word hope didn't even make sense anymore. It implied there was a such thing, and I knew that there had been a time where I knew what that word meant. So that tells me it was a chemical malfunction. It was a disease process that I was struggling with at that time in my life. You can get well. We are learning so much more about the mind, the body, all the connections. We're learning so much more about it, and there is hope. Reach out to someone, get the help that you need, and don't stop until you do get the help. We've got to break this cycle. And you will be the one to help others when you learn how to help yourself and when you get the help that you need. Don't be embarrassed to ask for help. And those of you who have been through it, like I've been through it, it's time for us to step up and start talking about it. It really is. we need to start normalizing the human experience and start talking about these things and bringing it into the light so that lives are saved, families are saved, moms and dads are here to tell their stories to their children, and that kids are here to continue their stories and to continue their lives. So that's what I wanted to talk about today. I hope everybody is doing well. Happy New Year. It's going to be an amazing year. So thanks for watching, and yeah, take care.